listening to Kill Cliff's Hazard Ground podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's story about a former Marine who has a passion for doing the same thing we do here on the Hazard Ground, and that's telling veteran and military stories. We'll get to him coming up in just a moment. Just a few reminders, as we've been beating you guys up the last couple of weeks, keep the reviews on Apple Podcasts coming. We are inching ever closer to the top 100 podcasts on Apple, and we need your help to do so. So go to Apple, leave a review. Doesn't have to be a long one, but just something short. Give us 5 stars. Tell us why you love the podcast. Tell us why you like the show, and that will help us out immensely. So continue to do that. You can do it right from your smartphone. It's really easy. Also want to remind you guys about our promotion with Amazon. You can go to our website, hazardground.com. You click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or under the sponsors tab. You get to do all of your normal Amazon shopping, whatever it may be. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities featured here on the show. As long as you go to hazardground.com first and then go to Amazon from our website, we'll get credit for it. And you can do the same thing from your smartphone. Just go to a web browser, and it'll direct you right to the Amazon app. So all of your credit card information, everything is saved. Really easy, really user-friendly, and you can help out veterans all across America just by going to hazardground.com first. Finally, follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast. Let's keep our social media following growing as we can tell more people about these stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, download the Kill Cliff app, the Kill Cliff TV app. You can watch all of our podcasts there as well. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, we certainly appreciate you guys consuming the Hazard Ground that way. On to this week's story about a former Marine sergeant who, after his career and deployment to Afghanistan and a MEU, went on to be a filmmaker and has made notable short stories, one that actually won an award at the Victory the Podcast Film Festival. It's a 3-minute video called A Marine Corps Story. It is outstanding. His latest works include Between the White Space and his most popular one, The Hun. He is Tyler Mendelson, joining us here on the Hazard Ground. Tyler, welcome, man, and thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot for having me.
As I said before, this is a passion of yours, telling great stories, telling stories about veterans, and we do the same thing here. So I'm glad we sort of have that synergy going together. And I told you before we started recording, I watched a Marine Corps story, man, and it really, what stood out to me, it just evoked a lot of emotions and a lot of things. You know, for anybody who's been downrange and is deployed, it sort of hit all those right notes and brought me right back to a lot of those same similar feelings. And full disclosure, like I was doing multiple things at the same time when I was watching it. I just put it on, but it was one of those things where I just stopped doing everything else and it just sucked me in. And I'm like, damn, like I'm back in that mindset again, man. And it was powerful. So it was great stuff, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad it held your attention.
For 3 minutes, it got all of my attention. Well done. Start back at the beginning for you. How and why'd you get in the Marine Corps?
All right. So basically, my father was in the Marines back in the 80s, and he was someone I always looked up to, just being an excellent father and, you know, just overall amazing person. And being a little kid and seeing his photo up on the wall, big photo with the, you know, wearing his dress blues, it was always something as a kid that I, you know, looked up to. And just like many people of the war on terrorism generation, 9/11 is what really was my calling to serve. I was just about to turn 9 years old. And basically from that moment on, I decided that I was going to go in the Marine Corps. And, you know, my whole time growing up, I just stuck with it. I said I was going to go in the Marines right after high school. And that's exactly what I did. And I originally was going to go infantry, but they basically had a really long waiting list at the time, basically over a year. So I said, screw that. And I went in under the construction MOS field, since the Marines can't choose their specific jobs. And I landed with armorer. Interesting.
Now, when you were 9 years old and decided all this, where were we in relation to 9/11? I know you're fairly young, but when does 9/11 happen? How old are you?
So, I mean, I was 8, literally like my birthday, September 23rd. So I was just about to turn 9. I live in New York, not New York City, but about an hour and a half away. And My father is also a police officer. He's done that for over 20 years. And he actually was called to ground zero and was helping clean up the bodies and everything like that. So just being in New York and having that background really, it played a big toll on me, and it changed my life forever, as it did so many other people. And that passion to serve, stuck with me from that moment on. And, it was always my hope and dream that I'd be able to go to Afghanistan to serve and, fight for my country. And, I was lucky to do that in 2012.
Interesting. Also a New Yorker, native New Yorker, also stepfather policeman, brother was a union worker in New York. They both were at ground zero. Where in New York, just out of curiosity?
So I'm from Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
I was born in Yonkers, so pretty close to New York City.
Yeah. So I'm not on the island. But it's not often you hear people say it was my dream to go to Afghanistan. I mean, that's a pretty perverse dream, especially for a 9 or 10-year-old kid. After the war broke out, I mean, I know your dad was a former Marine, but there was no of your parents talking you out of it, realizing that if you do this, you're absolutely going to war with a chance you'll die.
I mean, nobody really expected us to be in war for over 20 years. So,
kid, he'll be out by the time he'll be done with this by the time
I'm sure they figured the war would be over by then. But no, my parents were always supportive of me going in the military. And so after my dad got out in the 80s, he was going to go in the Marine Reserves and he was in the mechanic aviation field, and they didn't have his MOS that he wanted. So he ended up switching to the Air National Guard, and he stayed with them for, I think, 23 total years of service. Wow. He just retired from them in 2013 or 14. And during that time, I believe in 2007, he deployed to Baghdad. And also he did a little bit of time in Afghanistan as well. So, I grew up basically watching him serve and deploy, and I wanted to return the favor and say, like, I'm doing this not just for, to show that I'm proud of my father and like want to do something that he has done, but I want to do it for my country, and because I believe it is the right thing to do and it is my calling.
It's pretty awesome. All right. So you're going away to boot camp. Clearly your dad has told you what to expect, right? I mean, none of this was a shock to you. Yeah.
So not even just him preparing me, but also watching a lot of videos on boot camp. I remember there was that documentary, Ears Open, Eyeballs Click. I don't know if you've seen it, but that was a very interesting look into boot camp as it is. And, it really prepared me for how mental it was going to be. Physically, thank God, from the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was playing varsity football. And that really prepared me physically, going in the weight room. And from junior year on, I started running 3 miles a day just to prepare for all the running that we were going to be doing. And I hate running. I still hate running. But that definitely helped out a lot.
So after boot camp, where are you headed?
So after boot camp, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, which is where I did my MOS school. And then I remember specifically we had 3 choices, quote unquote choices, of where we could go for a duty station. And I believe I put Cherry Point number 1 because that's where my dad was stationed. So I thought it would be kind of cool to stay East Coast and go where he was. And number 2, I think I put Camp Pendleton. And then number 3, I put overseas, like for Okinawa. And I ended up getting my 3rd choice, of course. Okinawa. Yep, the Marine Corps doesn't care.
The Army does the same thing. You realize if you put the crappiest selection on there, they'll give you that one for if you just put it on there. Like, when we had an OML list for officers, it was 10, right? Like you put like 10 on there. If you put like Fort Riley, Kansas, they're sending you. You're going. You'll end up there.
No one, Louisiana, the military, know to put your best choice last. And then that So go.
Completely counterintuitive. So you're headed to Okinawa. Excited or no?
I was excited because I had never been out of the country before. So just as like a person, like I was excited to explore and see something new. And, the flight is 16 hours long or something like that. And, I just went to the airport and then got on a huge plane and went to an airport in Tokyo, which from there I would fly out to Okinawa because the flights you have to fly domestic to Okinawa. And it's like a whole nother world there, which, I didn't know what to expect. But I mean, from the time I got there, I absolutely loved Japan. Okinawa itself, it was complicated because we had so many rules being stationed there because of, dumb military members getting in drunken incidents on or off base, and the country really taking that seriously. So there was a lot of like lockdowns that we had for drinking off base. And I mean, I was underage at the time anyway, so I had to wait till I was 20 because 20 is the legal age there for military members. But I mean, I was with such a good group of people, and literally, I mean, from the moment the very first day I actually got to my unit, we got rushed into this theater, and the battalion commander came on stage and basically gave us a presentation that we were going to be deployed to Afghanistan. So from that moment on, we were literally nonstop training for Afghanistan. So I didn't even have like a break to, get used to Japan. I was immediately getting, prepared for war.
Yay or nay on sake?
Sake's awesome. I would say Habu sake would be my choice. Right. Very rare drink.
You a lot of Sapporo there? I mean, Sapporo, is that the beer of choice over there?
Sapporo was actually my first legal beer.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Yep.
They get huge cans here in the States of that stuff. It's like the old Foster's oil can. You're drinking that for an hour. It's a commitment. So do you know where you're going in Afghanistan?
We had no idea at the time until a little later on. They told us we were going to the Helmand province, going to be stationed out of Camp Leatherneck.
All right. Okay. So one of the major posts. When you get there, you get there in 2012 now. What is your mission? What do you know about what you're supposed to do every day?
Right. So I was part of Combat Logistics Battalion 4. And we were basically in support of the infantry units out there. I think it was RCT3, if I'm correct. I can't remember. It's been so long. But basically, we were in support of the grunts. And I personally was placed in charge of the armory for a motor transportation company. And basically, I was in charge of the armory for them. I prepared all the weapons for them and repaired them and got them ready for, our battalion was basically going out on these, motor T convoys with all these tons and tons of supplies to go in support of the grunts and to transport to different FOBs. And in that time, my company gunny, who was really one of the most supportive people of me as a, individual member of the company, basically was like, do you want to go out as a gunner on these convoys? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So he basically worked in time where we got some military police people to be sort of armory custodians to work under me to take over for me when I was gone. And then I would just go out on the convoys, which is what they would do in their spare time too. And I would just be a machine gunner for the convoys. So I did a bunch of those.
I mean, I assume that's exciting for you, right? Like this is part of that whole dream of going to Afghanistan. You didn't want to sit in an armory all day long.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't want to be the quote unquote fobbit where, you just sit on a base the whole time. And it's like, you deployed, but did you really do anything that's worthy of a deployment? So I was happy to actually be going out of the wire and, doing things that could get me in combat. I mean, obviously no one really looks forward to combat if you know what war is like, but, I wanted to do something that would be worthy of me saying that I served my country and went to war.
Yeah. It's a personal badge of honor, right? Like,
Yeah.
just to have it's almost like just one story. That's all I need is one story, right? One story. And that sort of, personally qualifies me. And, we say that sort of tongue in cheek. I mean, I don't look at anybody who went down range and didn't get into, contact as somebody who didn't deploy, but I understand the feeling a lot of us felt that you kind of wanted it to be real. At least to test your mettle.
Yeah. And you also see that a lot with veterans now, like, if you come in contact with veterans who either didn't deploy or didn't get into situations that are considered like, combat or dangerous or anything like that, they sort of like have this guilt or a depression because of them feeling like they aren't worthy because of everyone else who did do those things. And it's sort of like this thing where, someone from Iraq or Afghanistan might not think that they're worthy of someone who was in Vietnam, and someone in Vietnam might not think that they're worthy of someone who fought in World War II. And it's like this perpetuating thing of feeling like you're not good enough compared to what others have done.
Yeah, certainly. So how often are you going outside the wire? Like, what's your operational tempo? Is it more than you expected? Was it crazy, or was it just sort of moderate? Because you're there at a time in Afghanistan where things are picking up.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty intense at the time, just for like our military operations in Afghanistan at that time. But for me personally, I basically went out on multiple, they were, 2 to 3 weeks at a time, convoys to different FOBs. Usually we would stop at one and then head to another one that's like way, far away. And it was just, it was tough also because I was in charge of my armory, and I was the only one who could do repairs and do all of the actual armor things that my military police Marines who were working for me couldn't do. So I sort of had to also take that into account, and I couldn't go out on, maybe as many as I would have liked, but, I certainly did enough time to where I'm, I could say I'm satisfied with it. So
I don't want to give it away because I really want people to watch a Marine Corps story, but that was factual, correct? That was based on your actual events?
All true story that, it was something that I've maybe told like 2 people in my life about that situation happening. And the film festival that the guys from Entourage did on the Victory of the Podcast, it sort of like gave me an opportunity to share that story and talk about something that, I do think about from time to time. And I just felt like it was the perfect opportunity with the 3-minute format that they basically had in their rules.
I will ask you if you want to share it, because I want people to watch it. But if you want to tell the story, I want to give you the opportunity to tell it. But I don't know if that's going to diminish the impact of watching it after the fact, because I didn't know the story personally until I had watched the 3 minutes. So I'll kind of defer to you. We could talk about something different. I know there was other experiences, but I'll defer to you on this.
Well, I guess I won't say the full story, but I will say sort of like what it is about. So maybe we can draw them in to watch it. Definitely check it out. It's on YouTube. It's called A Marine Corps Story. Basically, it's a 3-minute narration of just a moment in time from my Afghanistan deployment, where I was on one of these convoys, and just a situation I ran in where I had split seconds to basically make a decision on whether I shot and killed someone to basically save, my fellow Marines' lives if it came to that. Because, a lot of times you're put in a situation where you don't know in these current wars if, who is the enemy.
Yeah.
It's sort of like Vietnam, where, the man in the black pajamas, the Viet Cong, were mixed in with the civilians. And they're, it's hard to tell when there's not a standard
right.
enemy wearing
good guys in one uniform, bad guys in another uniform, and you know who to shoot at all the time.
Exactly. And the rules of engagement were crazy.
Yep.
So basically you have to like call in to your lieutenant to basically request to engage in combat or, request to fire or whatever you're going to do. And, in the back of your head, you're thinking like, if I fuck this up, I could be put in Leavenworth and, sit the rest of my military time or however long of my life in prison
rocks. Yeah.
Because I made a decision that I thought would be saving lives of my fellow Marines. So
I will say this much. I had a very similar story, and I think that's kind of what drew me in. And it was, oddly enough, a white vehicle as well.
Wow.
And I think the point is, and again, we'll move on after this because I want to talk more about your personal experience, but there are certain experiences you have downrange where the memories are so crystal clear. And it doesn't matter how far you get away. We talked before. You're like, hey, it was so long ago, I can't remember. There are certain things that they're galvanizing moments that you never, ever forget. And when you were telling your story, all of these emotions and all of these thoughts and all of these sort of feelings, like I could feel my skin, like goosebumps starting to come up on my skin as I was watching it, because I quickly and brought back to that same exact moment, that same exact place where it is a split-second decision between life and death. And that is something that let's put it this way. That's like the groundwork for PTSD.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
That is the framework and groundwork for how PTSD develops. And then you just start stacking those incidents on top of one another. And you don't really get a grasp of, without clearing the first one off the deck, the second one has more weight. And so from that standpoint, it was, it was very impactful for me to watch. So again, a Marine Corps story. I highly suggest you guys all take 3 minutes. It's absolutely worth your time. That said, I'm sorry, I got a little bit emotional there. That said, there were other, incidents on this deployment that you had to deal with. Like what other ones sort of stand out to you?
I mean, anytime anyone of my fellow Marines left the FOB, there's things that you never forget and things that will stick out in your mind. I can tell you literally yesterday. So I was riding back from a road trip from Minnesota. I had to go to a wedding. So it was a 19-hour ride back to New York. And I didn't even tell my girlfriend who was riding with me this, but there's this one point in time when it was, it was nighttime and we were passing by this big building with a lot of lights on it, like just all the way down this building. It must have been like a warehouse or something. And I distinctly it brought me right back to Afghanistan. I remember leaving the FOB. Every time we would leave Camp Leatherneck, I just distinctly remember how long of a process it was, leaving that base. And always in the middle of the night, very early morning, you're leaving. And I don't know what it was, but there was just this giant string of lights. I can't remember if it was on a building. I think it was on just these big metal posts, but I mean miles long of these lights. And you're so tired at the time and you just see this endless row of lights just as you're slowly leaving this base. And you were thinking to yourself, am I going to get hit by an IED this time? What's going to happen when I leave the wire this time? And, I would always make my prayers before I left. I'm not overly religious, but, I prayed when I was in Afghanistan, and every time I would just think what's going to happen after these lights go away? And when I was on this ride yesterday, I thought about that immediately when I saw those lights. It just took me back, and it was just this little out of body experience that I'm sure you can relate with. Just certain things in your life, just instantly bring you back. And, they're just memories that don't go away. And, even though there's some things that are blurry in your mind, there's certain things that just are so crystal clear that, it's impossible to, it's impossible to erase that memory.
Yeah. And my fellow Baghdad compatriots will remember the trip out to the Flying Man, which literally it took you 20 minutes to get off base. But the Flying Man, for those who aren't familiar with Baghdad International Airport, there literally is a statue of a man with wings, and his arms are spread all the way out, and he has wings, and it's the flying man. And allegedly the story goes that, he was a man who tried to fly, and he was killed because he tried to fly. And anyway, but there's a big statue of him almost in jest. But the flying man was often referred to as the hugest checkpoint at BIAP. But very similar in that aspect. You just, once you got to the flying man, you knew it was game on.
Yep.
So, it's crazy how, and I've said this before, it's crazy how the flashbacks almost sometimes are as, what's the right word? I want to say debilitating or crippling, but they're almost as memorable as the incidents themselves. At least for me, they are. I can remember certain times where flashbacks hit me hard, and where I was, and just, I was at the beach one year, a couple of years ago with my family, and we went out to the beach to watch a 4th of July celebration right on the boardwalk. And as soon as the first one went off, I could not stop hearing radio calls in my ear for literally 15 minutes straight. Every time one exploded, I kept hearing radio calls in my ear, like as we were driving through the street. It's just, those kind of things just stick with you forever, as you said. So, as that deployment goes on, do any of your guys, end up being wounded or killed?
So we had a couple wounded with various incidents. I don't think any that were like heavy combat related, but we had one guy died in one of our sister units that was out with us, and I'm trying to think. Honestly, mainly it was the suicides after the deployment that hit us the hardest.
We'll get to that in a minute. How does the deployment end for you?
So I ended up having to fly back, I think a little bit. I was in the Advon group just to prepare the armory. So the advanced party that went back just a little bit before everyone else. So I basically did the 7 months and then flew back to Japan, and just got the armory ready back in Oki for everyone to come back. And, it really sucked. I remember getting back to Okinawa, and we had like this little welcome home party. And you think of all these touching moments where, family and, girlfriends and everybody are waiting around for you with signs, and they run up to you and hug you on the flight line and all that stuff. And at the time I was in a long distance relationship. She obviously wasn't there, and my family wasn't there. And only the staff NCOs and officers who were married and, had family that were around basically got this warm welcome from their family. And I was a 19-year-old kid, just like, all right, I'm back, and didn't have anyone to greet me, and just went back to my room. And it was lonely.
Listen, I'm with you. I was single for both my deployments. Everybody got a hug. I just stood around like, okay, time to go home now. May as well. You just stand around looking. Will somebody hug me? Somebody pretend that they know me. Somebody just come up and say hello, shake my hand, give me something, man. Yeah, it was the same way for me. Like, I remember we got back into the armory, we pulled up, and, everyone's there shaking hands and this, that, and the other. And I shake hand with the general and this, that, and that. And I just start looking around. I'm like, I guess I just go home now, huh? Like, everyone's standing here celebrating and smiling. Like, I'm just standing like a schmuck by myself. Time to go.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I certainly understand that. When you had got back and you finally had a moment to reflect on it all, did you kind of fulfill the dream that you had talked about? Like, was the experience enough for you?
I would say yes. I mean, you can't ever predict or say exactly what you're going to do. And I think it's foolish to do that, because you never know what's going to happen in war. You never know what your orders or what your unit is doing, or like anything like that. You can't control it. So you just do the best you can at what you're given. And the group of guys that I was with in the armory, and the memories that I have, and the experience and everything like that, I'm blessed with having. And I'm very fortunate to have done it. And there's times when I'll say that I miss Afghanistan and I wish I was back, with the same people. And just because I think it was such a fulfilling time in my life, as me fulfilling a purpose that I set out to do.
Yeah. There are definitely times, especially now that I'm all grown up and I have a family of my own, where I think Baghdad was easier, man. All you had to do was stay alive.
Exactly.
All you had to do was stay alive. Like as difficult as that was, it was so much easier than being a grown adult and having responsibilities.
Exactly.
All I had to do was stay alive.
Exactly.
That and find random crap to buy on the internet. Other than that, those are the toughest choices you had to make. If you're a single guy like you and I were, obviously, if you have a family and you're deployed, which I never had the experience of doing, it's a completely different scenario. So, and I always tip my cap to those. I talk with my wife now about, one day hopefully taking a brigade, on a deployment, and she looks at me crazy and she's like, "You're going to leave the kids?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to leave the kids. I plan on coming back." It's just, but it's a completely different mindset when you have a family.
Yep, exactly.
So hats off to all those people who had to deploy and leave kids behind. That's just that's a whole different level. So after Okinawa, when you get back to Okinawa, you're moving on to a different base before you head out to your MEU, or no?
So I had basically around 6 or 7 months from the time I got back to when I got transferred to my next duty station. Got the orders to the 22nd MEU in North Carolina, Camp Lejeune. And
also, by the way, not on your list.
Not on my list, no. But I was okay with it. And I was like, oh, wow, now I'm going to a MEU and I'm going to deploy again. There's no break. My entire time on active duty was deployments, which, I'm fine with, because I didn't want to be one of those people who just got stuck on, one base and did nothing their whole time.
Yeah. Well, it makes it go by quick, right?
Yes, it went by fast. And it was interesting because literally my orders said I was going to be the armory chief for the MEU. And that is, a higher, it's basically a staff NCO billet. And I was a corporal at the time. So I knew I was stepping into some big shoes, and, I was just excited to film.
So you're going on a MEU, and you're not going to Iraq or Afghanistan at this point in time. Well, Iraq was over by this time, but theoretically, of course, it's over now. But we digress. That said, were you sort of upset that you weren't going back to combat and you had a whole different sort of deployment in front of you?
At the time, no, because I was just ready for a new experience. And I knew that, a ship deployment compared to a normal combat deployment, completely different thing. And from what I had heard, the 22nd MEU and the ones that do the med float get to go on really cool libo calls. I was ready for a different experience.
Well, I guess you got it, obviously. I mean, it's, it's funny. I remember you had the fortunate pleasure, I think, with the benefit of hindsight, of being moved all over the place. I remember when I was on active duty, I was literally that guy who was stuck at Fort Hood, Texas, which is a quasi miserable place to be. Clean. It's just not the hot spot they made it out to be in the brochure. That's for sure. But, it was one of those things where I kept saying to my command, I'm like, can we go somewhere? Can we do something? Like I was supposed to be all I could be, or at least that's what the slogan was. And all I was doing was rotting in the middle of the Texas heat. And I kind of felt that way, which is part of the reason why when I was offered to leave active duty, I took it, because I'm like, we're not doing anything like this. And of course, it was a pre 9/11 world. But I just felt like it was one of those things where it was so mundane, so Groundhog's Day, so boring. But you get the absolute opposite experience of that, where you're always on the go and you get to see the whole world, which I think is pretty awesome.
I still feel very fortunate for that, because I think at the time it was, it's hilarious to me that I wanted to go infantry at the time. I wasn't able to, or I could have if I waited that year and some change to go. But the guys who I knew who became grunts, right at the same time I was, who basically wanted to deploy, and that was their whole purpose. They wanted to go to war and fight and everything. They ended up getting stuck on like Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton their entire time, didn't deploy at all. And, they were basically just doing drills out in the field and, mundane shit like cleaning. And they were just pissed that, I didn't end up being a grunt, and I deployed to Afghanistan. I was a gunner on convoys, and then I got to go on the MEU, and I got to do all this shit that they didn't get to do. So I don't know. I find it kind of funny. Yeah.
Very similar to me. When I deployed, I probably saw 75% more combat infantry time than the infantry did, or 75% more combat time than the infantry did, because they were busy guarding gates and guarding prisons. And I was just fortunate enough in an assignment that I never had any, intention of ever being in, where it just called for something completely different. So my first deployment was a great experience. Second one was, I was definitely a fobbit, but we were there for the closeout of Iraq, and nobody was doing really any kinetic operations other than special operations. So it was fairly much a waste of time. That said, for you, you decide to leave active duty. When did you know that you wanted to do that, and kind of how did that decision all come to pass?
Yeah, so my active duty was up in November of 2014, and I never planned on being a lifer. The Marine Corps was something I always wanted to do since I was a kid, but I knew I had other dreams in life that I wanted to accomplish, and I knew that as long as I was in active duty military, I couldn't accomplish those dreams. So I decided as soon as 2014 came, I was 22 at the time. I knew it was time to, hang up the boots and, pursue my college degree and then go onward for my career.
It's insane. You got out after 4 years of 22. I just got started. All right. So you decide to go to the reserves and everything else. So what are these other dreams? And were these things that 9-year-old Tyler wanted to do, or you felt this, this developed along the way?
Yeah. So, from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old, I basically have wanted to be a filmmaker and, direct movies. I remember the first time I saw Star Wars, my parents got me the VHS box set. And
always Star Wars for you kids.
Yep.
What did I miss with Star Wars as a kid? Saw it, it just didn't resonate with me.
It
didn't motivate me.
How imaginative it is for someone with a creative mind to see such a creative set of movies with so much special effects and so much amazing storytelling that just resonates with young people, with adults, with everybody, and that leaves such an impression on our pop culture. And really the way George Lucas went about making those movies is what made me want to do something similar with my career. And, just make something with your mind that turns out to be this amazing thing. It's film art, and, it's not the same as picking up a paintbrush and, painting on canvas, but it's basically the same concept where you have this idea for something in your mind, and then to see it come to life, literally see it form into a real tangible thing that you have created. It is just the best feeling in the world. And growing up, I made little movies, with a camcorder. I used to play with Legos a lot, and I would make these little stop motion Lego movies. When I was a teenager, I turned into doing what's called machinima, if anybody's heard of it. It's basically making movies in video games, which helped a lot because, as a kid, you don't have a budget or anything to work with. So you basically have everything you need in a video game, and you use
a sort of web streamer before it was popular.
Basically, yeah. Back, mid 2000s is when
now all these folks are making millions of dollars as 20-year-old kids playing video games online. You were doing it and didn't make a damn dime. Way to go, Tyler.
Yep. But,
by the way, real quick, it's funny you talk about the way the inspiration for they made the movies. The first thing that popped into my head, I'm going to date myself here, that was the Thriller video and the making of Thriller. Now, if you ever watched the documentary on the making of the Thriller video, which was, again, I'm an MTV kid, so the greatest music video of all time. But all that inspired me to want to do is be in front of the camera, not behind it. So I had a totally different mindset. Hence why I'm sitting in front of the camera right now. But, I had a totally different mindset of it. But yeah, that much I can understand. The seeing that inspiration for the whole thing, gives you that drive. It's just Star Wars itself. It was great. I mean, Carrie Fisher was a smoke show back in the day. It's good enough for me. And Han Solo was a badass. But, other than that, it didn't really turn me on the way it did everybody else. And 17 Star Wars movies later, I'm still missing out on all of it. So,
I'm not a fan of the Disney made sequel trilogy, but yeah, Star Wars isn't everyone's forte, but it's enough people's to where it's very popular.
I do a very good Chewbacca impression, but we'll save it for So you knew you wanted to do this. Was there any sort of cultivation of it while you were in the Marine Corps, or was it something you put a full stop on and said, I'll wait till I get out?
So I didn't necessarily make like short films like I'm doing now in the Marine Corps, but I did. So it was funny, like during my deployments, I would always pick up a camera or my smartphone at the time and just start recording stuff and taking photos and doing all the media stuff for the people I was around. And you could ask those guys like all the time. They would be like, put the fucking camera down, stop recording me, stop doing this, stop taking photos, all that. And then after we got out, they're like, man, I wish we took more photos. I wish we did more videos. And I wish I stopped telling you to put the camera down. And I was like, see, I fucking told you so. Like, these are memories we'll never get back. Like, we need as much recorded as possible. You know, we're never able to do this stuff again. I can't just say, all right, I'm going to Afghanistan. Let's go. Bye. And I actually, both of my deployments, I recorded little montages, you know, just different clips compiled together with music, and put those out just to show off some of the funny moments from the deployments. Like the Afghan deployment, inside the armory, like behind those closed doors, we were absolute animals. We pulled pranks on each other 24/7, and it was just nonstop hilarity. And then the Mew, I actually made a music video for the song "Turn Down for What," when it, you know, that was like soon after it came out. So you know, I was still recording and doing little artistic things with what I was able to do.
Just out of curiosity, so, you know, you do the Marine Reserves thing, you do it for 2 years. Do you 100% know unequivocally that you want your Marine career to end at that point in time? I mean, it's locked in.
So I actually took a little break in 2015 when I got out fall 2014 of active, and then a little bit past spring, I think it was May, I was like, all right, you know what? I think I want to be a grunt, like in the reserves, just to say like I, you know, went in the infantry like I wanted to do originally. So I was literally like going to infantry training for the Marines, for the reserves. And while I was there, I was basically a month and some change in, and I had a massive heat stroke while digging the fighting holes. They stuck me and another sergeant in a spot that had clay all the way down, and we're in 120-degree heat, and we're just chugging away at this thing, and, you know, just chipping away at this clay in the ground, and it would not come out. So we're just struggling and overexerting ourselves, and I just ended up going down first before my friend did. He was loopy too, but I ended up having a temperature of 106.8, got rushed to the emergency room, almost died. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. I've been suffering problems because of that since, like vertigo and panic attacks and all this stuff that I link completely to that, because since then my brain has never felt the same. But after I flunked out of that, I mean, I didn't flunk. I would have stayed to finish it and just pick up with the next course. But I literally was not under orders, and I was already approved to go to school a month from then. So I literally wasn't able to. Was
in like regular school?
I was going to college at Emerson.
Right, regular. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I was about to start at Emerson, and there was physically no way that I could finish with the next course. That's why I was trying very hard to stay with my platoon and say, like, don't drop me. Like, I want to finish this. I'm ready to go. And basically because of the military doctors, they refused to let me stay with that current platoon. So I would have had to start the whole thing over, which would have been another 2.5 months. And I couldn't because I was about to start school. So I was like, fuck it. Like, I can't do it. So ended up going to college. And then after the first semester, I was like, all right, I still want to do the Marines. And I ended up just going back as an armorer in the reserves at a Air Force base close to home. They had a Marine air wing unit there.
Okay. And then eventually you just do one more year and you say, I'm good, or does something happen?
Yeah. So I was
good.
It was right around the time of when I was basically getting ready to film the Hun, and I tore my meniscus, and I didn't find out it was torn until I was literally in the middle of my 3-mile run on the PFT. Like, I knew I had injured it. I was actually playing 2-hand touch football just with my friends, like, and ended up injuring it. It hurt really bad. And then I just kind of like subsided. The pain like went away a little bit to where I could walk normally and stuff. But I didn't run anything until that PFT came. PFT came a mile and a half in. It was like the worst pain I've ever been in my life. Like my friend even took a photo of me running it. Usually on a PFT 3-mile run, I'll usually run about 22 miles time limit.
Yeah.
I'll usually run it in 22 minutes. Sorry. And I finished in 28:08, literally 8 minutes. I failed it by 8 seconds. And I've never, ever in my life got less than a first class PFT. And I ended up failing because of that 3-mile run. And I was like, obviously there's something massively wrong with it. So I got an MRI, tore meniscus. I had to get surgery. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm about to film The Hun. I have to get surgery. Maybe this is just time to hang it up for good.
There's way too much synergy between us because I literally right now as we sit here have a torn meniscus and I have surgery scheduled for next month.
They suck, man. I mean, the surgery is bad, but the meniscus thing sucks.
But yeah, I literally haven't been able to run in the better part of 3 months. I can everything else. I can walk and move. I just can't run.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to get it repaired. But it's just weird. There's too many connections between you and I at this point.
Yeah,
all
right.
So you get out. Now, when do you make your first film?
So I had already been making short films. I mean, growing up, obviously. And while I was in college, I was making films for my college courses. And at that point, it was funny because I was already insanely ahead of everyone else as far as editing goes, just because of all my prior experience doing the online films, things like that, where a lot of these kids were coming in and going to college and they didn't really do any kind of editing before then. So I was already way ahead. And, you know, you can instantly tell a student film when the audio is off. And, you know, the audio is probably the toughest thing to do when editing a film. I personally believe, just because getting the levels right and making sure there's no fuzziness or anything. Like, you know, if you're doing a complicated film and you have so many sound effects and different audio tracks to work with, it's very complicated. So that's like instant turn off for student films. But for me, like mine were pretty squared away. My editing was crisp and, you know, I was just ahead of the game. But then, so while I was in college, my junior year, basically there was so many rules as to what we could and couldn't make based on like security and safety for us as students. And I wanted to stray away from what everyone else was doing at my college, where they were just making these stupid dorm room dramas and, you know, little relationship movies where, you know, they're out on park benches and just doing this stupid dramatic shit with the stuff that's around. You know, can't fault them for that. But I wanted to go outside the box and do something different, because how else are you going to stand out as a filmmaker if you're doing the same thing as everyone else? So I tried to do something that I thought I couldn't do, or I basically thought was impossible at this stage of my career. And I was like, you know, I'm a huge war buff, history buff. And at the time, there wasn't really a lot to do with World War One. Aside from, you know, films back in the day, Paths of Glory and a couple others. But I wanted to make a modern World War One film. And I was like, how the fuck am I going to do that with basically no budget? And, you know, to make a realistic or convincible war film at my stage in my, you know, student filmmaking career. And you know, I just worked it out in my brain. I started developing the project. It literally took 2 years to develop. You know, even though it's a short film, it's 12 and a half minutes, but I basically raised $23,800 through Kickstarter from all my friends and family and support. You know, I literally just reached out to people over and over for 30 days on Facebook, just preaching to them, saying why I think this is an important film to tell a military story about, you know, our troops who fought so bravely and are now forgotten because nobody really thinks about World War One. It's kind of overshadowed by World War Two and Vietnam. So I wanted to tell that story, and I just preached it to them. And, you know, even though I had basically no work to show them of me as a filmmaker, like a lot of people didn't even know that I made movies, and they just basically felt my passion, and they, you know, entrusted their money and their effort in me. and we raised the budget, and I just started collecting all the costumes and designing the trench in, little designs, and then getting all the cast and crew from people from my college, and then people I knew back home who did film stuff. And after 2 years of developing, I basically got this thing together, and we filmed it in fall 2017, August 2017. The trench ended up being 165 foot length of a trench, and
wow.
we in Pleasant Valley, New York, on my friend's grandfather's farmland, and they were, his family was so gracious as to, let us do that, and they also housed all the cast and crew in their house, and it was just probably the best on-set experience that any of us have had. Like, all my friends who were there tell me it's an experience that they'll never forget, and probably their most enjoyable time on a film set. And, it was a huge challenge for me as a, first major time directing with such a big sort of project that had so many different logistics. And it was just an amazing time. And the film ended up coming out on New Year's of 2018. And since then, it's just been success after success with that one. And, it's definitely what I'm most known for. But I'm so glad that I just decided to just go with my heart and not be worried about the what ifs and thinking that I might fail in doing it. There was challenges all along the way that I thought I would fail the whole project and it would be an epic disaster, but it ended up being an amazing success. And I think my filmmaking career has instantly jump-started because of that. And it's given me the tools and the resources to, progress to where I want to be, as a filmmaker. Just, making films out in Hollywood is my ultimate goal.
So in reference to a Marine Corps story, I know you talked about it before. I want to get to the film festival, but
yeah.
A lot of young filmmakers start out by talking about stuff that they know and their own personal experiences and somehow transforming that onto the screen.
Yeah.
When did you get the idea for it? And you said you'd only told the story 2 times. Why all of a sudden did you decide to express it in this format?
So I didn't even plan on entering the Victory the Podcast Film Festival just because of the format it was in, where, it's literally only 3 minutes long and you have to use a smartphone to do it. I've never worked with a smartphone to make an actual movie, and I've never told a story in 3 minutes. Like, what could you possibly do in 3 minutes? They said you can't do a film trailer. So I just had like very little ideas. My friends who were wanting me to do the project basically were coming up with these little comedy skit ideas. And I wanted to do something that would grab their attention and be heartfelt and not something that they would watch, maybe get a little chuckle out of and then forget about. And I wasn't even thinking about winning the contest. I didn't even think I'd be in the top 10. I just decided to do something following my heart. And I thought, as I was thinking of ideas for the film, I wanted to do something that I could sort of use as like a testimonial and like a little way to get something off my chest and express it creatively. So I decided to tell that story because it's stuck with me since. And, since I wasn't able to tell anyone else about it before then, I felt like that this is the perfect medium. And having only 3 minutes to tell it, I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge to feel like I had to rush through it and not, get more into depth. But it was enough to where I felt like I could tell the story successfully and basically be a hard-hitting 3-minute film that grabbed your attention and didn't let go.
I appreciated the little cars demonstrating the whole layout of the thing. That was well executed.
About most.
Yeah. So you have this, and between the white spaces also, in between the white spaces also, what you're working on, or your latest work about the number of suicides. Do you get this idea that, veteran stories and in particular military stories seem to have a different, angle? Do they tug at heartstrings different? I mean, what's sort of the special part about veteran stories, not only that draws you to it, but draws an audience into them?
I think it could do either exactly as you're describing, or it could do the opposite based on who is making the movie. I think it's sort of our job as veterans to tell veteran stories and tell military stories where, someone with military experience might not do a good job at it because they don't, they're lazy. They don't get a military advisor on their projects. They don't know the experience like we do. And, telling military stories isn't like my only goal as a filmmaker, but, having such a intense background with the military, it's obviously going to inspire me in certain ways creatively. And, I draw all of my filmmaking off of personal experiences and interests and, everything that affects my life. And with the military suicide thing, I'm trying to just strictly raise awareness of this epidemic that's, happening within the American service members and veterans that people don't really think about. We often see the number 22 veterans a day, but no one really thinks about why is this happening? How can we stop it? What exactly is the common mindset, or like what is a mindset that what draws someone to this conclusion that they feel that there's no other option, that they decide to take their lives? Why are veterans so often depressed and left broken after either combat or after getting out of the military in general? And the transition is the biggest thing that people don't think about, and how different our civilian world is compared to the military, and how disassociated normal civilians who never served in the military are from veterans. It's such an isolating thing that, people don't think about. And I wanted to raise awareness for that and honestly pay tribute for the three of my friends who did commit suicide, who I deployed with. And it also drew in experiences from my own mental health struggles and one of my best friends from the Marines, his struggles with mental health and the conversations that we had on the phone. And luckily I was there and caught the warning signs and was able to talk with him about it and be there for him in a way that no one else was. So I sort of drew in all that inspiration to create an artistic piece about, veteran suicide.
You mentioned your three friends. I wanted to ask you, was there a particular one that really was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, or was it just all three of them together and a accumulation of things?
All right. Well, two of them literally happened in 2015 in a matter of 2 weeks from each other.
Wow.
So in a span of 2 weeks, two people who I knew, who I deployed with, were dead from suicide. And it was such a hard-hitting thing to experience that, just as, a friend and a fellow Marine, to know that we all failed him, maybe not in the way that, we might not have seen the warning signs, or we weren't around, we're in different states. We might have not talked in a while, or like just in general, like the people who we deployed with. But also, it's so hard when our family members and our friends back home, and no one really has that shared experience to where they might pick up warning signs or understand. And we don't know what living situations are like back home. And everyone sort of goes to different places after, a deployment or after their time in the military. And not everyone stays in touch. And it's so hard to see this happen to people we serve with. Good people, such nice, caring people. And, you think about the moments that you had with them, and you just wish that they were still around to treat the rest of the world with their kindness and their character. And, you can never get them back, and it's just hard.
Yeah, I think we all know they deserved a better fate, and at least a better path than the one that they chose. So from that standpoint, will suicide continue to be, or veteran suicide continue to be, thematically something that you're working on, or will you work in other areas as far as veteran stories are concerned?
So as far as film goes, I'm letting that film stand out as a testament to that topic. I'm sort of straying elsewhere right now. I'm trying to not only focus on veteran stories because I don't want to be typecasted as a creator, as a filmmaker,
Right.
as just veteran stories. So I'm sort of straying out a little bit. I'm still going to sort of incorporate veterans in my projects and possibly in some of the stories and in things I do, but I don't want to only tell veteran stories entirely. But I do have some other creative stuff in the works, and I'm currently writing my next film, which should be probably around 40 minutes. I'm just like working my way up towards a full-on feature film. And right now, the biggest struggle is just trying to raise the budget. Time and time again, I can't just keep using Kickstarter and hoping that people donate to me, because it gets to the point where your budgets get bigger and bigger, and you can't just keep asking people for money and trying to beg, borrow, and steal. You have to, find investors or people who are going to fully fund the film. And it's just a challenge. So it sucks that it's not like a painter can just buy an easel and buy paint and buy a brush and they can just paint whatever they have in their mind. I have films in my mind and I'm not able to make them unless I can raise the money to do it,
Right. Well, if you need some help, I'm offering my services as a good-looking, dapper, baritone voice actor who can play a variety of roles for a very, very minimal price. So keep me in mind for your next film. As long as you give me a role that makes me the hero and has people wanting to be me, then I'll do whatever you need me to do. It's just a small criteria for my services. But again, I'm always for hire, just so you know. So just out of curiosity, what's harder for you, manning a 50 cal or editing the audio for your film?
They're both tough in their own way. I mean, 50 cal is easy enough as long as you do the headspace and timing, and there's no one flying at you at 50 miles an hour and you don't know if there's a suicide bomber. But
yeah,
film audio, man. I mean, not even just the audio, just editing in general for, in between the white space and the Hun. Very difficult for me to edit, both for very different reasons. White space was more of a experimental with, if you watch it, which I definitely recommend everyone doing. It's on my YouTube, Mendel Films. It's a completely white background and it's supposed to be a seamless transition between shots. And it's just this, text message conversation with visuals of the people as they're going through it. You don't see the phones because in my mind, when creating it, they're basically representations of their real selves. So you don't see them on their phone because they're in the phone conversation. And it's just this seamless transition between their conversation and showing them and, different shots of them doing stuff. And to do the seamless white background was very tough to do while editing. And then for the Hun, just to make a realistic war film on a low budget, very, very difficult to get the sounds right and the visual effects right. Thank God, we did such a great job while being there to where I didn't have to rely too much on myself in post-production. But, I definitely recommend people watching the film so they can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But very, very tough to do.
What is the skill or skills that you got from the Marine Corps that best helps you out in filmmaking?
Good question. As a director, leadership, leading from the front, I've been on so many film sets where I was, helping out a friend or not, where I wasn't in the leadership roles. I was, extra crew on the side or doing a specific thing. And, I've seen the cast and crew be miserable on film sets where they feel like they're not, like they just want to rush through it. And I don't think that's what a film production should be like. I always try to make my sets are fun and engaging and challenging, but in a rewarding way. And I'm always on the front lines of those sets where I'm just trying to lead from the front and show people I'm willing to do literally everything that they're going to do and that I'm asking them to do. And, show just, I will go up to every production assistant, every costume designer, every makeup person, everyone on the set, and I will make sure that they are good and motivated and happy. And I think that's the same qualities that a leader in the military should have. Small unit leaders, NCOs, officers, they should do that too. And that's sort of the lessons that I learned from my leaders in the military, the good ones at least. And I try to take those positive qualities of a leader and apply it to film. And just as a filmmaker in general, the qualities, I would say, never saying you can't do it, or never taking no for an answer when it comes to something that you set your mind out to do. Just refusal of failure in the way where you will just never give up to accomplish what you set out to do. Even though failure can be a great lesson, as long as you don't quit there, I think, that's something that I definitely learned from the military, facing adversity.
I can't believe I forgot to ask you this before, but I want to go back to the Victory the Podcast Film Festival and finding out how you won and everything else, and sort of, the submission. I forgot to ask you this whole thing. I apologize.
Yeah. So I submitted it. I think it was like April 20th or something like that. Like literally we filmed it like the weekend before it was due. And then I edited it within a couple of hours after we filmed, for maybe like 3 or 4 hours in one day, and then submitted it. And I didn't hear anything back for months. They kind of like gave a deadline of like when they would release the winners, and they didn't do it at that time, which, I understand, they're busy people. So I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then they finally were going to release the winners. And I had messaged Doug Ellin, who is the creator of Entourage. He's also on Victory the Podcast. I'd messaged him trying to share In Between the White Space on his Instagram without even mentioning Victory, the film festival that they were doing, or that I submitted, or anything like that. And he responded to me, and then he asked if it was anything like the project that I submitted for the film festival. I was like, no, it's a different one, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, we were just talking about, And he's like, we loved your work, and blah, 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 blah. And we'd love to talk to you about it. And I was like, oh my God. And then the one of the producers from them basically emailed me and told me that, spoiler alert, that I was basically a winner for the film festival, and they were going to be getting in contact with me. So then they did a episode for the podcast where they announced the winners, and it was amazing, like listening to that for the first time and hearing how much they were praising me and my work. Entourage has always been my favorite show growing up, and just because of it was my dream essentially to grow up and do what they were doing, as this guy from New York who goes out and follows his dreams in Hollywood and brings his friends along, and all the cool things about Hollywood and film, and living the lifestyle. And so growing up watching them, and then having them literally talking about my work, especially at this stage in my life, it was incredible. And then a couple weeks later, they got me in for a Zoom call to basically interview me, and they did an episode with all the filmmakers and interviewed them. So it was awesome to hear that with me and all the other filmmakers talk about their work. And knock on wood, they said they would love to get me out to LA to meet with them in person and check out the facility and all that stuff. So I'm just trying to find a time within the next couple months, hopefully, to get out there and go meet up with them.
That is awesome. Kevin Connolly's a Long Island guy.
Yeah.
He's a New Yorker.
And it's kind of funny. Like I've always said, like, I mean, I might not look like it right now with the short hair and the beard and everything like that, but he's always been like my sort of like celebrity lookalike, the short guy. And I always fit in so well with his character on Entourage. Like I felt like I was E, and just for him to be like praising my work. Now he follows me on Instagram, and he's just such a nice guy. So for that to happen, it was just so cool.
Yeah, I was much more of an Ari lookalike in sort of personality and demeanor. Jeremy Piven is one of my doppelgangers, but nonetheless, yeah, Entourage is it hits home. Always has, always.
Yep.
So that's awesome. Wish you nothing but luck with that. That's great. I hope it blossoms into something amazing for you. So,
Thank you.
Where are you right now with everything that you were dealing with? You mentioned, whether it's, PTSD and a lot of the stuff that you had to deal with, where are you with all that?
Yeah, I didn't mention this before, and I didn't really have time to on Victory the podcast when they interviewed me. But so I'm back in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I work for Mental Health of America. And within that, I run a program for veterans in a group we have what's called veteran programs here. And within that, I run one of the programs, which focuses on helping homeless and at-risk veterans find employment. And we also have a housing program here, and we all help with veterans' mental health issues. So I've been doing that for 2 years now, and I love helping other veterans and trying to change their lives. So far in the past 2 years, I've gotten, my program has gotten 68 veterans jobs. We've gotten countless veterans housed, and, dealt with their mental health issues, which, the VA and other people don't really do successfully a lot of the time. So I'm very fortunate to work here, and it's just been an amazing ride so far, but it's also tough.
That's amazing, man. I mean, it really is. Your propensity to give back and continue to, make veterans part of your life and tell their stories is, again, as I said at the top of the show, we're doing the same thing here. We just want to tell great veteran stories and give people an avenue to have the opportunity. Not everybody's going to be American Sniper and Lone Survivor, but maybe they can be, in the Hun, or maybe they can be on the hazard ground and have their story told one way or another, or in between the white space. And well, hopefully you're not telling a story about that, but you get my point. Just there's somebody there to convey what they went through in a way that maybe they can't convey themselves. And I think that's really, there's a catharsis in all that. For a lot of our guests, there's a sort of therapy session involved in all this. We hear that a lot from our guests, and certainly the people who listen. But I'm glad that we sort of are sharing that same passion. You're just doing it in a much different format. So again, continued success and continued luck with that. I want to remind everybody again, the Hun, a Marine Corps story, that 3-minute short film contest that won the Victory Podcast short film for best drama and In Between the White Space. All this stuff is available on your website at tylermendelsonfilm.com. Where else can they get in touch with you on social media, or wherever else?
So my Instagram is at Tyler D. Mendelson, Mendelson, or they could look up my YouTube. It's called Mendel Films, or they could just type in the Han or In Between the White Space in the search bar, and it'll come up.
And again, a Marine Corps story. 3 minutes, folks. There's no reason for you not to. You can do it while you're on the can, for crying out loud. But I don't recommend it because it is kind of intense. You might get more than you bargained for if you're on the can. So, but Tyler, listen, man, it's been great talking to you. I love this story. I wish you nothing but the best of luck going forward. I hope your film career continues to trend upward, and that you, much like fulfilling your Marine Corps dream, you'll fulfill your filmmaking dream, end up in Hollywood, and we'll all see more of your work coming forward soon. But I certainly appreciate your time, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've listened to a bunch of, Hazard Grounds recently, trying to gear up for this. And you guys do such an amazing job. And I think it really is such a positive thing for the military community. And, I'd love to come on again in the future, give you some updates, hopefully some good ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Tyler Mendelson, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Thanks so much, man.
You've been listening to Killcliff's Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.